Hey guys, and welcome back to the channel. Today is going to be one of the most important videos for any of you guys that are considering modifying or tuning your WRX STI, Subaru, everything you need to know. We're talking about the 5 biggest mistakes new Subaru owners or Subaru owners that are new to the tuning and modifying world make with their WRX, their STI, and you can make this about most Subarus just in general, but a lot of these are going to be focused on the WRX and STI platforms. Now I've got my notebook here because I've spent the last couple days working on this video because I really wanted to go through basically every comment and every experience that I've ever had in the 7+ years that I've had with this platform, both in ownership. This is my 3rd WRX, and I also now, and for the last 3 years, have owned a performance parts and cosmetic parts company in the Subaru world. So I would say that I have a decent amount of experience with these cars. I'm also a mechanical engineer and spent a good chunk of my career in the automotive sector and kind of still do with the company that I run right now. So if you are wondering why you should listen to me, that's why. But this is an incredibly important video. Even if you've started modifying your cars, please make sure you're not making one of these mistakes, so stick through it. So there were like 10 or 15 here, but I got them boiled down to the top 5 that are the most important, that are probably the most covering mistakes that anyone can make. And I obviously have all of my notes here, so I just wanted to keep them with me in case I wanted to talk about something, so please disregard. But the first one is, and this is a classic mistake people make, and these apply to any years, is they start modifying their WRX or the STI to make every sound, cool sound, like purr, blow off, intake noise possible. And they don't know what exactly they're doing. They might not be tuning the car, they might just be installing the parts. The amount of people where I see WRXs and STIs make all kinds of hissing and air noises, and then the person say, but I'm too afraid to void the warranty or affect the warranty, so I'm not tuned. The amount of damage that they're doing on their car, depending on the year and the model, can be catastrophic, and they don't even know it. They've just jumped the gun because they want their car to sound cool. And with naturally aspirated cars or other turbocharged cars, they're just like, I threw a blow-off valve on and it's totally fine because I'm doing 100% atmospheric blow-off and the car's fine. And then you start talking about them and they're like, well, these cars have these funny things where they do this funny thing in first gear, and you're like, no, that's because you're venting fully to the atmosphere with your blow-off valve and you're trying to make this noise. Or they're like, my car is like doing all these weird things, and you're like, well, you're leaning out in 4th gear because you're bringing in so much more oxygen and your car doesn't know what to do because it's not running a tune. There's all these things that you can do. There's a bunch of things that you can do to these cars that can affect it. So the first step is understanding you can't just make a bunch of noise with your car without understanding why the noise is being made and having the proper tuning or part requirements around making all those cool and fun noises that all of us want to make. Now, it's not that you can't make those noises, just make sure you do them safely. The next one on our list is kind of building from that, and it's the lack of research people do when they actually modify and tune these cars. People get excited with cars, they're just like, I want to modify, and they just start doing things. It can go 2 routes. One, the easy one, is you can start modifying your car but not planning for the future of where you want to go. You know, classic examples are fuel pumps, where you don't buy a fuel pump that's, you know, rated correctly for the amount of power that you want. But that can go in any way with these cars, where there's tons of parts where the logical next step might not work. Another great example would be J-pipes and catback exhausts. They don't all equally fit, right? They're not all the same. So it's not uncommon for somebody to buy a J-pipe and a catback at different times, just so excited to do it, and they don't fit. But this is a bigger problem where people don't do the research to understand what parts require tuning, what parts can destroy your car, make your engine fail without tuning, what parts require certain other safety modifications to run. You need to do your research. A lot of people are like, it's easy to make power on these cars. It is if you know what you're doing, and it's also just as easy to make power and spend $15,000 on an engine replacement. Both are very easy to do and things that you really need to focus on from a research perspective. I always tell people that are buying parts from me that I see in public or anything like that that have questions for me, if you have a question regarding your journey with your tuning, right? If there is a question, you already don't know enough to continue your journey. You need to step back. And yeah, that can be an alarming thing because some people are like, I don't want to be an expert. Well, if you don't want to be an expert, take your car to a tuner and pay them to do absolutely everything and spit it out an end product. A lot of us don't want to do that as car folks, but that is something that you could do if you don't want to spend the immense amount of time it takes to fully understand what you're doing to your car, which is very important. Also, if you're driving a tuned car, you need to be able to self-diagnose the values you're getting from your access port. So you got to understand how some of this stuff works Anyways, all right, this is a big one. Number 3 on our list is people buy a CVT. So Subaru doesn't make normal automatic transmissions. They make a CVT, which is a continuously variable transmission. Now, if you're driving a WRX, or actually it doesn't apply to a STI, it's just basically the WRX platforms. If you're driving a WRX and you go with this CVT, you need to know up front that you cannot do everything you can do with a manual on your CVT. Your transmission is a weak point. Those cars are not equal. And it's very important to understand that. The amount of comments that I get and people reaching out that want to do certain things with their WRX that have a CVT transmission, and how disappointing their faces look when I advise them, sell your car, buy a manual transmission, and then do it because you cannot do it, or you should not do it with a CVT, they're very disappointed, right? But it comes from a couple things. There's one, just a lack of research, which isn't a negative thing, right? It's not like Subaru advertises that. You really have to do some digging if you're not familiar with this platform. But it's a trap a lot of people fall into, and it's one of the reasons why it's pretty easy to get, especially a VA CVT on the market, because that was a classic. A lot of people bought them and didn't realize that you couldn't make power. A great example is I'm so invested in that whole concept and that whole issue, so much so that I bought a CVT originally with this channel to test a lot of the things with it, and I didn't make it very long because I bought a manual because I wanted to tune it. So there's some personal experience. Not that I didn't know what I was getting into, but I wanted the CVT because that was going to help me get onto the YouTube scene, let's just say, because not a lot of people were making CVT content. Another huge mistake people make, and it's actually pretty common right now, especially with the VB WRXs that you see on Facebook is a great example, is people's lack of understanding about fueling and gasoline. So one of the things with this car that you must understand is that these are direct injection engines. They're not port injections. What is the difference there? If you just, a very basic difference, it's a port injection injects through a port, not directly into your cylinder. Direct injection does exactly what it sounds like. It is direct injection into your cylinder. It's a way better way of fueling your car. The only huge negative with direct injection is you're spraying that fuel directly into your cylinder. So two things can happen here. One, this is my biggest gripe of the industry and something that not a lot of people talk about, is if you put bad fuel or less than optimal prime fuel in your car and there's extra carbon or bits in it that shouldn't be there, they will bake onto the interior of your cylinder and everything in your engine as you burn that fuel. It doesn't just disappear. That carbon doesn't disappear. The best example of that is if you own a VA WRX, and I'm assuming you're gonna have to do the same thing with this car, you need to blast the interior of the engine to clean it before you get tuning because so much carbon builds up, and you need to do that every 30 to 45,000 miles, and it costs a lot of money, and you have to open up your engine cylinders to be able to do it because the carbon builds up so much. But if you focus on buying high quality fuel, you will avoid that to the max. To give you guys a good example is I was very, very anal about the fuel that went into my 2016 WRX, which is where I did most of my tuning on it. I never needed blasting. I did have it scoped by Bread & Tuning, and I did have it scoped by a couple other organizations during that whole journey, and because, I'm just assuming it could be anecdotal, but I did only put Shell V-Power at high volume gas stations in that car, I never really had substantial buildup in it. How do you do it? You go to high volume gas stations. That's the most important part, is going to a gas station that's constantly refilling their tank. You never want to pump the bottom of a underground gas tank into your car, especially direct injection. So just put premium fuel, 93 if you have it, 91 if you don't have 93, into your car. Don't mess with lower octane. I know that with the VB WRX, you can technically put regular on it. If you guys want the quick 10-second one, you shouldn't do that. It has a lower octane number, which means it's less resistant to knock, which means you have a higher chance of a knock event, which means it's less safe on the car. You can also push a lower compression value on it. I have a whole video on this channel talking about ethanol fuel versus just pure gasoline, and in that video I talk about different octane numbers and how that affects your car. Go check that out if you want a full engineering explanation. But the short answer is the higher the octane number, the higher the octane fuel, let's just say. Basically, the more premium the fuel, the better it is for this car, the less likelihood you are to have any type of failure, and the better you are around compression events. The last one on this video, and this is something that's becoming more and more a thing that I talk to people about, is, back in the day, if you've been in this game for a long time, there were a lot of really well-known tuners, and a lot of people traveled to those tuners. Now, because tuning cars is becoming more and more common and there's a lot of money in it, more and more companies are tuning cars, specifically Subarus, because they run off the Cobb access port and the Cobb tuning platform, and they're relatively easy to tune. Now, there is something important to be said here. Not all tunes and not all tuners and tuning services are the same. One common misconception that I see a lot just through the channel, through feedback, through people that reach out for parts specifically on my website, and just like my time in this community, is they just assume that if I'm going with the Pro Tune, it's gonna be perfect and I'm gonna be safe. Not all Pro Tuners are the same. Now, I'm not here to hate on anyone, say anything negative about any specific tuners. They're just not the same. If you go with somebody that's tuned 10,000 WRXs versus somebody that's tuned 60 WRXs, obviously there's a difference. That's like saying, would you rather go to a restaurant and eat from a chef that's made, 10 years of cooking, right? And it's done 10 years of cooking and make you a meal, or would you rather somebody that's just graduated college that's never cooked for themselves make you a meal? Which meal is going to be better, right? There's some level of repetition and practice creates the best environment. The most important thing there too is if you go to a tuner that does a lot of Subarus, specifically the engine and platform that you drive, they also know more about failures, issues, diagnoses, how to make it safe. The classic here is you see a lot of tuners that just tune any car that comes across and anyone that will pay them to tune, and they sell you on they're the best tuner around. Those are the ones that typically you see blown engines because they're just like, let's just make as much power as we can. And because they're not specialists in the exact car, they don't know the little things that can cause issues. Now, those people are obviously still very good at their trade because they understand the engine itself, but some of the reasons and specific examples about why you would want to go to a high volume tuner is they know from their own evidence when you start having transmission issues with the manual transmission, when torque becomes a problem, when certain things can be a problem, whether it's altitude-based, fueling-based, ethanol-based, part-based. They just have more knowledge about tuning around the platform. So when it comes to tuning your car and tuners, you need to understand that not all tuners and tuning services are equal, and you need to do your research to make sure that you're bringing your car to the right person to tune it in the way that you're hoping to get out of that car. Because if you want a safe tune, go find a tuner that does a lot of safe tunes, right? One of the reasons I went to Bren Tuning with my last WRX is at the time, they were one of the highest volume tuners in the country, right? They had some of the best reviews, and they made some of the most high horsepower builds, and they also made some of the best daily driver tunes on the market. And I had a wonderful experience with Bren. I am not a tuner. I don't pretend to understand, well, I know a little bit about how tuning works. I know more than the average person, especially as an engineer. But I don't pretend like I've done 10,000 cars. I wouldn't even dive into that realm because those guys have been tuning for longer than I've been driving some of these people. So you've got to understand, you got to go to the right people, and that's going to make your experience with the platform and your experience with the car so much better. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. Hopefully you learned something here. Hopefully you enjoyed the list that I have. Hopefully I covered something. And if you have any questions or you want to talk about anything else, the comments below. I'm there all the time, but this community on my channel is also awesome, extraordinarily knowledgeable. Someone will answer your question. If you've got a question, drop it in the comment section below. If you want a recommendation, drop it in the comment section below. If you need part advice, you can either put it in a comment or email JXR Performance specifically. There's a link in the description, and I'll answer your email. It's just me, so I'm the one answering it. If you have a question specifically for me, I'll see you guys in the next video.